Right now, at this very moment, your soul is already destined for a specific spiritual realm based on your current level of consciousness. America's greatest psychic, Edgar Cayce, documented exactly how this works through over 14,000 psychic readings that have been preserved word for word in Virginia Beach. In 1923, during one of his deepest trance states, Cayce shocked his stenographer when he began describing 7 distinct spiritual planes where souls reside between earthly incarnations. He didn't just name these realms, he explained exactly what determines which level your consciousness can access, and more importantly, how to elevate yourself to higher dimensions while you're still alive. Before we dive into these life-changing revelations, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this information has been suppressed from mainstream spiritual teachings for nearly a century, and YouTube's algorithm doesn't always show content this profound to everyone who needs to see it. Here's the shocking truth that will change how you view your entire spiritual journey forever. In one of his most disturbing readings from the mid-1920s, Cayce revealed that most humans are completely unaware they're operating from the lowest spiritual frequency possible. They're trapped in what he called the material consciousness realm, a spiritual plane so dense with ego and physical attachment that souls can remain stuck there for hundreds of lifetimes. But wait, there's something even more disturbing that Cayce discovered about spiritual evolution. During a reading for a businessman in 1932, something unprecedented happened. Cayce's voice suddenly changed mid-reading, and he began speaking in what witnesses described as an otherworldly tone. He revealed that this man's soul had been cycling through the same spiritual level for over 800 years, because he kept making the same consciousness mistake in every incarnation. The stenographer, Gladys Davis, later wrote in her notes that she had never seen Cayce so agitated during a reading. When he awakened, he had no memory of what he'd said, but the message was crystal clear. This soul was trapped, and Cayce had just witnessed something that terrified even him. This changes everything we think we know about spiritual progress. You see, most people believe that simply living multiple lifetimes automatically leads to spiritual advancement. Cayce's readings prove this is completely false. In fact, he documented case after case of souls who had been reincarnating for millennia without ever moving beyond the first spiritual realm. Let me paint you a picture of what Cayce saw when he looked into the Akashic records, that cosmic library where every soul's journey is recorded. Imagine 7 towering levels of consciousness, each one representing a different frequency of spiritual awareness. At the bottom, you have what Cayce called the earthbound consciousness. Souls so attached to material desires, fear, and ego that they create their own spiritual prison. Here's what's truly shocking about this lowest realm. In one of his most documented cases, Cayce described souls who had been stuck there since ancient Atlantis, over 12,000 years ago. These weren't evil people. They were ordinary individuals who simply never learned to transcend their basic human impulses. They kept choosing comfort over growth, fear over love, and ego over service. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Cayce revealed that these trapped souls don't even realize they're stuck. They believe they're making spiritual progress because they're going through the motions of earthly life, working, loving, struggling, dying, and being reborn, but their consciousness never actually evolves. They're like spiritual zombies, unconsciously repeating the same patterns lifetime after lifetime. Now, before you start panicking about your own spiritual level, let me share something that will give you hope. In 1944, just 1 year before his death, Cayce gave what many consider his most important reading about consciousness evolution. A woman from New York asked him directly, "How can I know which spiritual realm I'm operating from?" Cayce's answer was so profound that it's been studied by metaphysical researchers for 8 decades. He said that every human being receives constant signs about their spiritual frequency, but most people are too distracted by material concerns to notice them. These signs come through dreams, sudden insights, inexplicable coincidences, and what he called soul promptings, those moments when you know something is true even though you can't explain why. But wait, there's a specific test Cayce gave that can reveal your exact spiritual level right now. In one of his most practical readings, he outlined what he called the consciousness mirror technique. This isn't some abstract meditation practice. It's a practical method that takes less than 5 minutes and will show you exactly which spiritual realm your soul is currently accessing. Here's how it works, and I want you to try this right after watching this video. Cayce said that when you encounter someone who triggers strong negative emotions in you, anger, jealousy, judgment, or fear, you're actually looking at a reflection of your own unhealed consciousness. The intensity of your reaction reveals your spiritual frequency. If you react with immediate anger or judgment, you're operating from the first realm, material consciousness. If you feel compassion mixed with understanding, you're accessing higher frequencies. But if you can see that person as a soul having a human experience just like you and feel genuine love for their journey, you're operating from what Cayce called the Christ consciousness, the highest spiritual realm accessible while in physical form. This technique is so accurate that Cayce used it to determine which souls were ready for advanced spiritual teachings and which ones needed to focus on basic consciousness work first. The results were always spot on. Now let me tell you about something that will absolutely blow your mind about spiritual evolution. In 1936, Cayce was asked to do a reading for a woman who claimed she had lived in Atlantis. Most people expected him to dismiss this as fantasy. Instead, Cayce not only confirmed her past life, but revealed something that changed everything we know about consciousness development. He explained that souls who lived during Atlantis had access to spiritual technologies and levels of consciousness that modern humans can barely comprehend. But here's the shocking part. Many of these advanced souls chose to incarnate in our current time period specifically to help humanity make a massive evolutionary leap. Cayce revealed that between 1900 and 2000, thousands of these Atlantean souls would be born with intact memories of higher consciousness levels. Their mission? To anchor higher spiritual frequencies on Earth and teach others how to access these elevated realms. This means that some people walking among us right now are operating from consciousness levels that are thousands of years more advanced than the average human. They're not here by accident. They're here on a spiritual mission to help our entire planet evolve to the next level. But here's what's even more incredible. Cayce said that any soul, regardless of their current spiritual level, can accelerate their consciousness evolution dramatically by understanding and applying what he called the universal laws of spiritual development. In one of his most comprehensive readings on consciousness, he outlined 5 specific practices that can move a soul from the lowest spiritual realm to the highest in a single lifetime. These aren't religious rituals or complex ceremonies. They're practical applications of consciousness that anyone can implement immediately. The first law is what Cayce called service above self. But this isn't just about volunteering or helping others. He meant something much deeper. Every decision you make, from what you eat for breakfast to how you respond to criticism, either serves your ego or serves your soul's evolution. Souls trapped in lower realms consistently choose ego gratification. Evolved souls consistently choose actions that elevate consciousness. But wait, here's where Cayce's teachings get really practical for modern Americans. In one of his most insightful readings about material wealth, he addressed the biggest obstacle facing spiritual seekers in the 20th and 21st centuries: the illusion that material success equals spiritual advancement. Cayce revealed that many souls actually regress spiritually when they achieve material success, because they mistake financial abundance for spiritual achievement. He saw countless souls in his readings who had been more spiritually evolved in previous lifetimes when they lived in poverty than they were in their current wealthy incarnations. This doesn't mean money is evil. It means that how you relate to material success determines your spiritual frequency. If your wealth serves your spiritual mission and helps others evolve, it elevates your consciousness. If it serves your ego and separates you from others, it traps you in lower spiritual realms. The second universal law Cayce revealed is thought as creative force. In one of his most profound teachings on consciousness, he explained that most humans have no idea they're constantly creating their spiritual reality through their thought patterns. Every thought you think is either raising or lowering your spiritual frequency. Here's the shocking part that most spiritual teachers don't tell you. Cayce discovered that positive thinking alone isn't enough to elevate your consciousness. In fact, he found that some souls had been using positive thinking to avoid dealing with their shadow aspects, which actually kept them stuck in spiritual limbo. True consciousness evolution requires what Cayce called purification through truth. This means facing your darkness honestly, accepting your human flaws completely, and loving yourself anyway. Only then can you access the higher spiritual realms where genuine transformation happens. The third law is healing as spiritual service. But Cayce didn't just mean physical healing. In one of his most revolutionary insights about consciousness, he revealed that every healed aspect of yourself automatically heals the same aspect in others, even people you've never met. This is because all consciousness is connected at the deepest level. When you heal your fear, you reduce fear in the collective human consciousness. When you heal your anger, you make it easier for others to release their anger. When you heal your shame, you help free humanity from the shame that keeps our entire species trapped in lower spiritual frequencies. This means that your personal spiritual work isn't just about your individual evolution. You're literally helping to evolve human consciousness itself. Every time you choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, or truth over illusion, you're pulling our entire planet toward higher spiritual realms. But here's something that will completely change how you view your spiritual journey. In 1942, Cayce gave a reading that revealed the single most important factor determining which spiritual realm a soul can access. It wasn't their good deeds, their meditation practice, or even their level of spiritual knowledge. It was their capacity for genuine forgiveness. Cayce explained that forgiveness is the master key that unlocks every higher spiritual realm. But not the kind of forgiveness most people practice, where you forgive someone while still holding on to subtle resentment or moral superiority. He meant what he called Christ-like forgiveness, where you completely release the need for anyone to be different than they are. This level of forgiveness is so rare that Cayce encountered it in less than 1% of the souls he read for. Most people think they've forgiven when they've simply suppressed their anger or decided to be the bigger person. True forgiveness requires seeing through the illusion of separation and recognizing that everyone is doing their best from their current level of consciousness. Here's a documented case that will show you exactly what this looks like. In 1938, Cayce did a reading for a woman whose husband had abandoned her and their 3 children for his secretary. She was consumed with rage and wanted to know if he would be punished in his next lifetime. Cayce's response shocked everyone in the room. He explained that her husband's actions were actually serving her soul's evolution by forcing her to choose between victim consciousness and spiritual mastery. If she could find genuine forgiveness for him, not because he deserved it, but because forgiveness would free her soul, she would make a quantum leap in spiritual development. The woman spent 2 years working with Cayce's guidance. When she finally achieved true forgiveness, she didn't just feel better emotionally. According to follow-up readings, her consciousness had evolved from the 2nd spiritual realm to the 5th realm, a jump that normally takes multiple lifetimes to achieve. But here's the most incredible part of this story. 3 months after she achieved genuine forgiveness, her ex-husband called her out of the blue. He had experienced what he described as a spiritual awakening and wanted to make amends. He had no idea she had been working on forgiveness. Yet her consciousness shift had somehow triggered his own spiritual evolution. This is what Cayce meant when he said that healing yourself heals others. Consciousness operates beyond the limitations of time and space. When you genuinely evolve spiritually, everyone connected to you, including people from past lifetimes, feels the shift and is given an opportunity to evolve as well. Now, let me share with you the 4th universal law that Cayce revealed. Death as conscious transition. Most people think death is something that happens to them. Cayce's readings prove that death is something you participate in based on your level of consciousness. In one of his most illuminating readings about the afterlife, he described how souls who have developed higher consciousness can actually choose their death experience. They can remain aware during the transition, maintain their memories and personality, and even guide their own reincarnation process. But souls operating from lower spiritual realms experience death as trauma and confusion. They often don't even realize they've died, and may spend decades in what Cayce called earthbound states, stuck between physical and spiritual dimensions, because their consciousness is too dense to access higher realms. This is why spiritual development isn't just about improving your current life. It's about preparing for conscious death and intentional rebirth. Every moment you spend developing higher consciousness is an investment in your eternal soul's journey. The fifth and final universal law Cayce revealed is time as illusion. In one of his most mind-bending readings about consciousness, he explained that souls operating from higher spiritual realms can access what he called eternal now consciousness, a state where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. This sounds abstract, but it has practical implications that will change how you live your life. When you develop this level of consciousness, you stop being driven by past regrets or future anxieties. You become completely present, which allows you to access the infinite creative power that exists only in the now moment. Cayce demonstrated this consciousness himself during his readings. He could access information from any time period, see probable futures, and even communicate with souls who had never been in physical form. This wasn't a special gift he was born with. It was a level of consciousness he developed through applying these same spiritual laws I'm sharing with you. But here's something that will absolutely transform your understanding of spiritual evolution. In 1943, Cayce gave a reading that revealed the true purpose of human incarnation on Earth. We're not here to escape the physical realm or transcend human experience. We're here to bring heaven to earth by anchoring higher consciousness in physical form. This means that the goal isn't to evolve beyond humanity, but to evolve humanity itself. Every soul who achieves higher consciousness while in physical form makes it easier for others to do the same. We're literally creating a new template for human potential. Cayce saw that by the year 2012, enough souls would have achieved higher consciousness that humanity as a whole would begin operating from elevated spiritual frequencies. He predicted that children born after this time would incarnate with natural access to psychic abilities, deeper spiritual wisdom, and an innate understanding of their soul's purpose. Looking around at the current generation of young people, we can see evidence that Cayce's prediction is coming true. These souls aren't interested in the same material pursuits that drove previous generations. They're naturally drawn to consciousness exploration, environmental healing, and authentic spiritual connection. But here's the most important revelation from all of Cayce's readings about spiritual evolution. Your current level of consciousness isn't fixed. Every moment presents an opportunity to choose thoughts, words, and actions that elevate your spiritual frequency. The question isn't which spiritual realm you're currently operating from. The question is, which realm do you want to access next, and what are you willing to do to get there? In one of his most practical teachings about spiritual development, Cayce gave the simplest and most powerful technique for accelerating spiritual evolution. Every night before sleep, ask your soul to show you one specific way you can serve love more completely the next day. Then pay attention to the opportunities that present themselves. This practice alone, done consistently, can move you from the lowest spiritual realm to the highest in a matter of months, rather than lifetimes. Why? Because it aligns your conscious mind with your soul's evolutionary impulse. But remember, spiritual evolution isn't about becoming perfect or transcending your humanity. It's about becoming more authentically yourself, the divine being you truly are beneath all the conditioning and programming. Your soul chose to incarnate at this exact time in history because you have something unique to contribute to humanity's evolutionary leap. The spiritual realm you're destined for isn't determined by your past mistakes or current limitations. It's determined by your willingness to keep choosing love, truth, and service in each moment. Edgar Cayce's 14,000 readings all point to the same profound truth. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And the quality of that experience, including which spiritual realm you'll access after death, is being determined by every choice you make right now. So here's my challenge for you. Take the consciousness mirror test I described earlier. Notice your reactions to people who trigger you. Use those reactions as a GPS system, showing you exactly where your consciousness needs to evolve next. Practice genuine forgiveness, not because others deserve it, but because your soul deserves the freedom it brings. Serve others not to get spiritual points, but because service is the natural expression of higher consciousness. And most importantly, remember that you're not on this spiritual journey alone. Every soul who has ever lived is connected to you through the same cosmic consciousness that Edgar Cayce accessed in his readings. When you evolve, we all evolve. When you heal, we all heal. When you choose love, you make it easier for everyone else to choose love too. The spiritual realm you'll inhabit isn't just about your individual destiny, it's about the collective future of human consciousness itself. And that future is being written by every choice you make today. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, because I'll be sharing more life-changing revelations from Edgar Cayce's readings that can transform your spiritual journey forever. Like this video if it resonated with your soul, and share it with someone who's ready to discover their true spiritual potential. Your engagement helps ensure this sacred wisdom reaches the souls who need it most. Remember, you are more powerful than you know, more loved than you can imagine, and more needed than you might believe. Your spiritual evolution matters not just for you, but for all of humanity. Keep choosing love, keep seeking truth, and keep serving the highest good. Your soul and our collective future depends on it. Edgar Cayce discovered that when a soul reaches its absolute breaking point, something extraordinary happens in the spiritual realm. In 1931, he told a desperate mother whose child was dying that her daughter's soul was actually choosing whether to stay or return to the spirit world. And 3 days later, the child made a miraculous recovery that shocked doctors. But here's what's even more shocking about this case. The sleeping prophet revealed that our darkest moments aren't punishments. They're actually cosmic opportunities for the soul to make quantum leaps in consciousness. Think about that for a second. Every moment of despair you've ever felt might have been preparing you for something magnificent. Here's what I'm going to reveal in this video based on Cayce's documented readings. You'll discover the 3 spiritual laws that activate during crisis, why some souls choose suffering as their path to enlightenment, and the specific technique Cayce gave for connecting with your higher self during life's most challenging moments. If this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this information could transform how you see every struggle in your life. Let me take you back to Virginia Beach in the 1930s. Edgar Cayce is lying on his couch, entering that famous trance state that would make him the most documented psychic in American history. The stenographer is ready. The desperate seeker is waiting, and what comes through Cayce's lips that day would change everything we thought we knew about human suffering. The reading was for a man who'd lost everything. His business had collapsed, his wife had left him, and he was contemplating ending his life. But instead of offering empty comfort, Cayce revealed something that shocked everyone in the room. He said the man's soul had specifically chosen this incarnation, knowing these exact challenges would occur, not as punishment, but as acceleration. Here's where it gets mind-blowing. Cayce explained that souls in the spirit realm actually volunteer for the most difficult Earth experiences because they provide the fastest spiritual growth. It's like choosing the advanced course instead of the beginner level. But wait, there's something even more profound about how this works. Cayce discovered that during our darkest hours, the veil between dimensions becomes thinner. In documented case after documented case, he revealed that moments of crisis open portals to higher consciousness that simply aren't accessible during comfortable times. Think of it like this. Your soul is like a diamond, and life's pressures are what create the brilliant facets. Without the pressure, you'd just be a lump of carbon. In one of his most documented cases, Cayce read for a woman who'd been bedridden for 7 years with a mysterious illness. Doctors had given up, but here's what Cayce saw in the Akashic records, that cosmic library where every soul's journey is recorded. He revealed that her illness wasn't random. Her soul had chosen this experience to develop compassion and to discover healing abilities she didn't know she possessed. But there was a condition. She had to stop seeing herself as a victim and start seeing herself as a spiritual student. Within 6 months of following Cayce's guidance, she wasn't just healed, she became a healer herself, helping hundreds of people over the next 3 decades. This changes everything about how we understand suffering, doesn't it? But here's what Cayce discovered in one of his most disturbing readings. Some souls become so attached to their suffering that they resist the very growth it was meant to provide. They get stuck in victim consciousness instead of recognizing their spiritual power. Cayce called this the Great Spiritual Trap, and he gave specific techniques for breaking free from it. The first technique is what he called soul recognition. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What is my soul trying to learn through this experience?" This single shift in perspective activates what Cayce termed the inner teacher. The second technique involves what Cayce discovered about prayer during crisis. Regular prayer asks for things to change. Soul-level prayer asks for understanding and strength to grow through the experience. Cayce documented case after case where this type of prayer led to miraculous breakthroughs. But the third technique is the most powerful, and I'll reveal that in just a moment. Let me tell you about a case that terrified even Cayce's assistants. A young man came for a reading after a devastating accident left him paralyzed. The doctors said he'd never walk again. His family was preparing for a lifetime of care, but when Cayce entered his trance, he began describing something that no one expected. He saw the man's accident not as tragedy, but as spiritual intervention. The young man's soul had been heading down a destructive path in his previous spiritual reading, and this experience was actually a course correction chosen at the soul level. More shocking yet, Cayce revealed that the man had the ability to heal himself completely, but only if he could understand the spiritual purpose behind his challenge. Here's what happened next. Following Cayce's guidance, the man began to see his paralysis as a teacher rather than a curse. He developed an unprecedented connection to his spiritual nature, and 18 months later, he walked out of that wheelchair. But the real miracle wasn't his physical healing. It was his transformation into someone who could help others find meaning in their darkest moments. This is what Cayce meant when he said that souls choose their challenges. We're not victims of random circumstances. We're spiritual beings having carefully planned learning experiences. Now here's the third technique that Cayce gave for connecting with your higher self during crisis. He called it the silence treatment, but it's not what you think. Instead of trying to escape the pain or distract yourself from it, you sit in complete silence and ask your soul to reveal the gift hidden within the challenge. Cayce documented that this practice could lead to profound revelations within 21 days. But wait, there's something even more remarkable about how this works in the spiritual realm. Cayce discovered that when multiple souls are struggling simultaneously, they actually create what he called collective spiritual pressure that accelerates everyone's growth. This is why difficult times in history often produce the greatest spiritual breakthroughs and enlightened leaders. Think about the great spiritual teachers throughout history. Buddha discovered enlightenment through confronting suffering. Jesus found his mission through wilderness trials. Every major spiritual breakthrough in human history emerged from periods of darkness and challenge. Cayce revealed that this isn't coincidence, it's spiritual law. In a reading that shocked his stenographer, Cayce described how advanced souls actually incarnate during humanity's most challenging periods, specifically to help lift collective consciousness. They volunteer for the difficult assignments because they can handle the spiritual pressure and transform it into light for others. This means that if you're going through intense challenges right now, your soul might be among these advanced volunteers. Your struggles aren't signs of spiritual failure, they're signs of spiritual strength. Here's what Cayce saw when he looked into the Akashic records of people facing their darkest hours. He consistently found that these souls had chosen their experiences as accelerated learning paths. But he also found something else that will blow your mind. He discovered that every soul going through darkness is simultaneously being prepared for a specific mission of service. The depth of your challenges directly correlates to the magnitude of the contribution you're being prepared to make. Let me share a case that demonstrates this perfectly. A woman came to Cayce after losing her husband and 2 children in a house fire. She was broken beyond repair, questioning everything she'd ever believed about God and fairness and meaning. But when Cayce accessed her soul's records, He revealed something extraordinary. Her profound loss was preparing her to become a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. Her grief had opened psychic abilities that would eventually help thousands of families communicate with loved ones who had passed on. Within 5 years, she had developed into one of the most gifted mediums of her generation, bringing comfort and healing to countless people facing similar losses. This is the pattern Cayce saw again and again. Our greatest wounds become our greatest gifts, but only when we understand them as spiritual assignments rather than cosmic punishments. But here's where Cayce's revelations get even more profound. He discovered that souls don't just choose individual challenges, they also choose to incarnate during specific historical periods that will provide the exact spiritual lessons they need. According to archived records from the Association for Research and Enlightenment, Cayce revealed that many souls alive today specifically chose to incarnate during this period of human history because of the unprecedented opportunities for spiritual growth it provides. The chaos, the uncertainty, the rapid changes we're experiencing aren't signs that something's wrong with the world. They're signs that something's awakening in human consciousness. Cayce predicted that periods of great challenge would be followed by periods of great spiritual advancement. He saw our current era as humanity's spiritual adolescence, marked by growing pains, but leading to unprecedented spiritual maturity. Think about this. Every challenge you're facing right now might be exactly what your soul signed up for before incarnating. Not as punishment, but as opportunity. Here's a technique Cayce gave for recognizing the spiritual gifts hidden within your challenges. He called it the gratitude transmutation practice. Instead of being grateful for your problems, you become grateful for your soul's wisdom in choosing experiences that will develop your highest potential. This shift from victim consciousness to student consciousness activates what Cayce called the inner teacher. But there's something even more powerful about how this works. Cayce discovered that when you truly embrace your challenges as spiritual assignments, you gain access to cosmic support that's simply not available to victims. The universe responds to students differently than it responds to victims. In documented case after documented case, Cayce saw that people who shifted from "why me" to "what is this teaching me" began experiencing what he called miraculous synchronicities. The right people, resources, and opportunities would appear exactly when needed. This isn't wishful thinking. This is spiritual law in action. Let me tell you about one final case that reveals the ultimate truth about souls in their darkest hour. A successful businessman came to Cayce after losing his fortune in the stock market crash. He was facing bankruptcy, public humiliation, and the collapse of everything he'd built. But when Cayce looked into his soul's records, he saw something that changed everything. This man's soul had become so identified with material success that it was losing touch with its spiritual nature. The financial collapse wasn't punishment, it was rescue. By stripping away his external identity, the crisis was forcing him to rediscover his true spiritual self. And that discovery would make him more successful than he'd ever been before, but in ways that truly mattered. 5 years later, he had not only rebuilt his fortune but had become a philanthropist who helped thousands of people find meaning and purpose in their lives. His darkest hour had revealed his soul's true mission. This is what Cayce meant when he said that souls choose their challenges. We don't incarnate to have easy lives. We incarnate to have meaningful lives. And meaning often comes through difficulty. But here's the key that Cayce emphasized in reading after reading. The challenge isn't the point. The growth through the challenge is the point. The wisdom gained, the compassion developed, the spiritual strength discovered, these are the real treasures that survive beyond this lifetime. According to Cayce's documented readings, souls who embrace their challenges as spiritual assignments develop abilities and awareness that carry forward into future incarnations. They become what he called old souls, beings of wisdom and compassion, who help guide others through their own dark nights of the soul. This means that whatever you're going through right now isn't just about this lifetime. It's about your soul's eternal journey toward higher consciousness and service. And here's perhaps the most comforting truth that Cayce revealed. No soul is ever given more than it can handle spiritually. Your challenges might feel overwhelming to your human personality, but they're perfectly calibrated for your soul's strength and growth capacity. You're not broken. you're not being punished. You're being prepared for something magnificent that you can't yet see but your soul knows intimately. The darkness you're experiencing isn't your destination. It's your preparation for becoming a light that will guide others through their own dark nights. This is what Edgar Cayce revealed about souls in their darkest hour. They're not suffering. They're transforming. They're not victims. They're volunteers. They're not being punished. They're being prepared. And they're not alone. The entire spiritual realm is supporting their journey toward becoming who they truly are. If this message resonated with your soul, I want you to do something important. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because there's so much more wisdom from Edgar Cayce that can transform your understanding of life's challenges. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Your soul might have led you here not just for your own healing, but to become a messenger of hope for others. And leave a comment telling me about a time when your darkest hour led to unexpected growth or opportunity. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear, to find the strength to continue their own spiritual journey. Remember, according to Edgar Cayce's documented readings, you didn't come here to live a small, safe life. You came here to become the fullest expression of your soul's magnificent potential. And sometimes that requires walking through darkness to discover just how bright your light can shine. But there's one more revelation from Cayce's work that I need to share with you. Something that will completely change how you see every difficult moment in your life. In a series of readings conducted in the late 1930s, Cayce made a discovery that shocked even his most devoted followers. He found that souls don't just choose their major life challenges, they also choose the specific timing of when these challenges will occur. According to archived records from Virginia Beach, Cayce revealed that our souls work with what he called spiritual advisors in the between-life state to plan not just what we'll experience, but when we'll be ready to handle each lesson. This means that crisis in your life isn't just random bad timing. It's precisely orchestrated spiritual timing, designed to maximize your growth and minimize unnecessary suffering. Think about the last major challenge you faced. Now think about who you were before that experience versus who you became afterward. Can you see how you were being prepared for something greater? Cayce discovered that souls often plan multiple crisis points throughout a lifetime, each one building on the strength and wisdom gained from the previous ones. It's like a spiritual curriculum designed specifically for your soul's evolution. But here's what makes this even more incredible. Cayce found that advanced souls often volunteer to experience intensified challenges because they can handle the accelerated growth and use it to help others more effectively. In one documented case from 1940, a teacher came to Cayce after losing her sight in an accident. She was devastated, believing her career was over, but Cayce revealed something that transformed her entire perspective. He told her that her soul had chosen this experience because it would develop spiritual sight far more powerful than physical vision. Within 2 years, she had become one of the most intuitive counselors of her era, helping thousands of people see solutions to problems that had seemed impossible. Her physical blindness had opened inner vision that allowed her to perceive the spiritual dimensions of every situation. Students would travel from across the country just to spend an hour in her presence. This is what Cayce meant when he said that every ending is actually a beginning in disguise. What looks like loss to our human perception is often expansion from our soul's perspective. Now let me share with you the most powerful technique that Cayce gave for working with challenging periods. He called it the spiritual detective method. Instead of trying to escape or fix your problems immediately, you become a detective, investigating what your soul is trying to accomplish through this experience. You look for clues in the timing, the people involved, the specific nature of the challenge, and the opportunities it creates. Cayce documented that people who approached their difficulties this way consistently discovered hidden gifts and opportunities that they never would have found otherwise. But there's something even more profound about how this spiritual detective work functions. Cayce found that when you start looking for the spiritual purpose in your challenges, you begin attracting what he called solution synchronicities. The right books appear, the right people enter your life, the right ideas occur to you at exactly the right moments. It's as if the universe rewards your willingness to learn by providing everything you need to transform the experience into wisdom and strength. According to documented readings from the Association for Research and Enlightenment, Cayce revealed that this isn't coincidence. It's how spiritual law operates. When you align with your soul's learning agenda, cosmic support automatically activates. Let me tell you about a case that perfectly demonstrates this principle. A young mother came to Cayce after her husband abandoned her with 3 small children and no money. She was facing homelessness and had no idea how to survive. But instead of focusing only on the practical problems, she used Cayce's spiritual detective method to understand what her soul might be learning through this experience. She realized that she had always been dependent on others for her security and had never developed her own inner strength and capabilities. This crisis was forcing her to discover resources she didn't know she possessed. Within 6 months, she had not only found stable housing and income, but had started a support group for other abandoned mothers that eventually became a nationwide organization helping thousands of families. Her greatest vulnerability had become her greatest strength, and her personal crisis had become her life's mission. This is the pattern that Cayce saw consistently in the spiritual realm. Our darkest moments aren't interruptions to our soul's plan. They're the most important chapters in our soul's story. But here's something that Cayce discovered that will give you tremendous comfort during difficult times. He found that souls are never alone during their challenging periods, even when it feels like everyone has abandoned them. In reading after reading, Cayce described what he called the invisible support team that surrounds every soul during crisis. This includes guides, teachers, and even loved ones who have passed on, all working together to provide strength, inspiration, and guidance. The key is learning to recognize and connect with this spiritual support system. Cayce gave specific techniques for this that I want to share with you. The first technique is what he called the daily council meeting. Every morning, you spend 5 minutes in quiet meditation asking your spiritual support team to make their presence known throughout the day. Then you watch for signs, synchronicities, and sudden insights that indicate their guidance. The second technique involves what Cayce called gratitude broadcasting. Before sleeping each night, you mentally broadcast gratitude to all the seen and unseen helpers who assisted you that day. This strengthens your connection to spiritual support and attracts even more help. But the third technique is the most powerful for receiving direct guidance during crisis. Cayce called it the emergency prayer protocol. When you're facing a situation that seems impossible, instead of asking for specific outcomes, you ask to be shown the next right step and to be given the strength to take it. Cayce documented that this type of prayer consistently led to breakthrough moments where solutions would appear that hadn't been visible before. According to archived records from his readings, Cayce explained that souls in crisis gain access to higher levels of guidance than are normally available. It's as if the spiritual realm opens special channels of communication when we need them most. This means that your most difficult moments might actually be when you're most connected to divine wisdom and support. The key is knowing how to recognize and receive it. Let me share one final story that captures the ultimate truth about what happens to souls in their darkest hour. A man came to Cayce after losing everything in a business betrayal by his closest friend. He was financially ruined, emotionally devastated, and questioning everything he believed about trust and human nature. But when Cayce looked into his soul's records, he saw something extraordinary. This betrayal was actually preventing the man from a much more devastating loss that would have occurred if his business had continued on its original path. More than that, the experience was preparing him to become a protector and advocate for others who would face similar betrayals. His own wound would become his qualification to heal others. 10 years later, he had become one of the most respected business ethics attorneys in the country, helping hundreds of people recover from fraud and betrayal while building a new model of business based on integrity and mutual support. His darkest hour had revealed his soul's true calling and had saved him from a path that would have led to spiritual emptiness despite material success. This is what Edgar Cayce understood about the spiritual realm that most people miss. Our souls aren't just trying to be happy in this lifetime. They're trying to evolve into beings of wisdom, compassion, and service that can contribute to the healing of the world. And sometimes that evolution requires experiences that challenge everything we think we want in order to reveal everything we truly need to become. Your darkest hour isn't your punishment. It's your preparation for a level of contribution and service that you can't yet imagine, but your soul has always known was your destiny. And when you understand this truth, when you really get it deep in your bones, everything changes. The pain doesn't necessarily go away immediately, but it gains meaning. The struggle doesn't disappear, but it gains purpose. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and become a student of your soul's wisdom. You stop asking why this is happening to you and start asking what you're being prepared to give to the world. And that shift, according to Edgar Cayce's documented readings, is when miracles begin to happen. Not just healing miracles, but transformation miracles. Not just change in your circumstances, but change in who you are at the deepest level. This is what the sleeping prophet revealed about souls in their darkest hour. They're being prepared for their brightest contribution. They're being refined into instruments of healing and hope for others who will walk similar paths. And they're being reminded that they are not just human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience for the purpose of serving something far greater than themselves. Edgar Cayce told a desperate mother in 1936 that adding a specific type of salt to her dying child's bath would save his life within 3 days. The child had been given up by doctors, his body racked with a mysterious illness that left him unable to walk or speak. 3 days later, the boy was running through their Virginia home completely healed. But here's what's even more shocking about this case. Cayce revealed that salt isn't just a healing agent. It's a direct connection to your soul's memory and the divine blueprint hidden within your very cells. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you see this simple substance sitting in your kitchen cabinet. In the next 25 minutes, I'll reveal why ancient biblical texts encrypted salt as a spiritual technology, how your body uses salt to maintain psychic connections, and the specific technique Cayce used to activate dormant spiritual abilities through salt that worked for thousands of documented cases. If you're ready to unlock secrets that have been hidden for millennia, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this information could transform your spiritual journey forever. The year was 1934, when Edgar Cayce entered one of his most profound trance states. His stenographer, Gladys Davis, sat ready to record what would become one of the most revolutionary spiritual revelations of the 20th century. But what came through that day about salt left even his closest associates stunned into silence. Cayce began speaking in his characteristic trance voice, explaining that salt wasn't merely a mineral or preservative as science understood it. According to the consciousness speaking through him, salt was what he called a crystallized memory of divine intention, a physical substance that held the vibrational blueprint of creation itself. But wait, there's more to this story that will blow your mind. In that same reading, Cayce revealed that every grain of salt contains what he termed atomic prayers, microscopic patterns that resonate with the same frequency as human consciousness. He explained that when salt dissolves in water, especially when blessed or prayed over, it creates a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms that can be measured and experienced. The woman who requested this reading had been suffering from what doctors called an incurable blood disorder. Cayce told her to dissolve sea salt in blessed water and drink it while reciting specific affirmations he provided. Within 6 weeks, her blood work returned to normal levels, and her doctors were baffled by what they called a spontaneous remission. Here's what Cayce discovered in one of his most disturbing readings about why salt appears over 35 times in biblical texts, and it's not what religious scholars have been teaching for centuries. During a session that shocked his stenographer, Cayce explained that when Jesus called his disciples salt of the earth, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was revealing an actual spiritual technology that the disciples were meant to understand and use. According to Cayce's source, salt was the physical anchor that allowed advanced souls to maintain their spiritual consciousness while incarnated in human form. The reading went deeper, explaining that salt's crystalline structure mirrors the geometric patterns found in what Cayce called the Akashic records, that cosmic library of all souls' experiences. When you consume salt mindfully, you're literally ingesting crystallized wisdom, that helps your soul remember its purpose and mission in this lifetime. This changes everything about consciousness, prayer, and healing. In documented cases from the ARE archives, Cayce recommended specific SALT protocols for accessing past life memories, enhancing psychic abilities, and accelerating spiritual growth. One man from Kentucky followed Cayce's SALT meditation technique and within 3 months reported vivid recall of 17 previous incarnations, complete with names, locations, and life lessons that transformed his understanding of his current relationships and career path. But here's where this gets really interesting, and in 3 minutes, I'll reveal the case that terrified even Cayce's assistants. Cayce taught that your body contains what he called SALT wisdom centers, specific locations where SALT concentrates to maintain spiritual communication pathways. These aren't just physical processes, they're literal antennae for divine guidance. Your tears contain the highest concentration of spiritually active SALT, which is why crying during prayer or meditation often leads to breakthrough insights and emotional healing. The human brain floats in cerebrospinal fluid that contains precise SALT ratios essential for what Cayce termed soul-brain communication. When these ratios become imbalanced through poor diet or spiritual disconnection, people experience what he called soul static, that feeling of being lost, purposeless, or spiritually numb that plagues millions of Americans today. Now here's the case that left Cayce's team speechless. A woman brought her husband to Virginia Beach in 1938. He'd been in what doctors called a vegetative state for 8 months following a car accident. His family had traveled from Oklahoma, spending their life savings on conventional treatments that had failed completely. In desperation, they sought Cayce's help. During the reading, Cayce instructed them to prepare baths using sea salt from a specific region, blessed with particular prayers, administered at precise times aligned with lunar cycles. He explained that the man's soul had become unanchored from his physical form, and the salt would serve as a spiritual magnet to draw his consciousness back into his body. The family was skeptical but desperate. They followed Cayce's instructions exactly. On the 7th day, the man opened his eyes and spoke his first words in 8 months. Within 3 weeks, he was walking and had recovered most of his cognitive function. Doctors had no explanation for what they witnessed. But wait, there's something even more profound about this healing that connects to secrets hidden in your own body right now. Cayce revealed that this man's recovery wasn't just physical healing. It was proof that SALT serves as a bridge between dimensions of consciousness. The SALT didn't just heal his brain, it restored his soul's connection to his physical form. This understanding opens up incredible possibilities for anyone dealing with depression, anxiety, or feeling spiritually lost. Your body produces SALT through various processes, but Cayce taught that spiritually conscious SALT production, meaning SALT created through prayer, meditation, and positive intention, carries different vibrational properties than ordinary SALT. This is why tears of joy heal differently than tears of sorrow, and why the SALT in your body responds to your spiritual state. Here's what Cayce discovered about SALT that modern science is just beginning to understand. In readings from the 1940s, Cayce explained that SALT crystals have memory capacity. They can store and transmit vibrational information, much like how we now know crystals can store digital data. When you bless SALT or pray over it, you're literally programming it with intention and divine connection that your body can access and utilize. Archaeological evidence supports Cayce's claims about SALT's spiritual significance across ancient cultures. From the Dead Sea Scrolls references to sacred salt rituals, to Himalayan salt deposits that formed millions of years ago, carrying what geologists call impossible mineral combinations, to Native American salt ceremonies that mirror techniques Cayce described in trance, the evidence points to salt being far more than a simple mineral. In one of his most documented cases, a young woman suffering from what we'd now recognize as severe PTSD came to Cayce after witnessing a traumatic event during World War II. Conventional therapy had failed, and she was considering institutionalization. Cayce's reading prescribed a specific salt treatment that involved dissolving blessed salt in water and using it for both internal consumption and external baths while engaging in particular prayer practices. The transformation was remarkable and witnessed by multiple people. Within 6 weeks, her nightmares stopped, her anxiety decreased dramatically, and she reported feeling spiritually cleansed for the first time since the trauma. She credited the salt treatment with saving her life and went on to help other trauma survivors using the same technique. This reveals something crucial about how salt works on the soul level that you need to understand. According to Cayce's readings, trauma and negative experiences create what he called soul debris, energetic residue that interferes with your spiritual clarity and divine connection. Salt, when used with proper spiritual intention, acts as a purifying agent that can dissolve this debris and restore your soul's natural radiance. But here's where modern Americans can apply this ancient wisdom in practical ways that will transform your daily spiritual practice. Cayce taught specific techniques for charging salt with spiritual intention. He recommended holding salt in your hands while praying or meditating, allowing your life force energy to infuse the crystals with divine purpose. This charged salt could then be used in cooking, baths, or even carried as a spiritual tool for protection and clarity. The process is simple but powerful. Take sea salt or Himalayan salt in your palm, close your eyes, and focus on your deepest spiritual intentions. Visualize divine light flowing through your hands into the salt crystals. Feel gratitude for this gift from the earth, and ask that the salt serve your highest good and spiritual evolution. One businessman from New York followed this practice religiously after hearing about Cayce's work secondhand. He charged salt each morning during meditation and used it in his coffee and meals throughout the day. Within 3 months, he reported dramatically improved intuition in business decisions, deeper prayer experiences, and what he described as constant awareness of divine guidance in his daily life. But wait, there's an even more powerful technique that Cayce revealed for accessing past life memories and soul purpose through salt work. During readings in the late 1930s, Cayce described what he called salt scrying, a method for receiving divine guidance and soul memories using salt and water. The technique involves dissolving blessed salt in spring water while asking specific questions about your soul's mission or seeking guidance on life decisions. As the salt dissolves, practitioners enter a meditative state and observe the patterns, images, or impressions that arise. Cayce taught that the dissolving salt creates a vibrational bridge to the Akashic records, allowing souls to access their own cosmic history and divine purpose. A teacher from California documented her experiences with this technique over 6 months. She reported receiving clear guidance about career changes, relationship decisions, and spiritual practices that led to what she described as living my authentic soul mission for the first time in my life. Her journal entries, preserved in ARE archives, detail specific insights and predictions that proved accurate over time. This connects to something profound about salt's role in biblical prophecy and spiritual awakening that most people have never heard. Cayce revealed that the biblical references to salt weren't just symbolic, but described actual spiritual technologies that advanced souls were meant to understand and use. When Lot's wife turned to salt, Cayce explained this wasn't punishment but transformation. Her consciousness had become so identified with lower vibrational states that she literally crystallized into the mineral that could preserve and purify. The salt pillar represented the choice every soul faces: remain attached to lower consciousness or transform into a purifying agent for divine will. This interpretation reframes biblical salt references as instruction manuals for spiritual evolution rather than mere stories or metaphors. Here's what this means for your spiritual journey and awakening process. Your relationship with salt reflects your relationship with spiritual purification and divine will. When you consume salt mindfully, blessing it and acknowledging its sacred nature, you're participating in an ancient practice that connects you to cosmic consciousness and accelerates your spiritual growth. Cayce taught that different types of salt carry different spiritual properties. Sea salt connects you to emotional healing and psychic abilities. Himalayan salt grounds you to earth wisdom and physical vitality. Rock salt from ancient deposits carries what he called time wisdom, access to knowledge from earlier spiritual ages when humanity had greater conscious connection to divine realms. A nurse from Virginia Beach began incorporating Cayce's salt teachings into her meditation practice and patient care work. She reported that patients responded more positively when she blessed the salt used in their IVs and treatments, and her own spiritual sensitivity increased dramatically over 18 months of consistent practice. But here's the most shocking revelation about salt that will change how you see your body's divine design. In readings from 1944, Cayce explained that your body's salt balance directly affects your ability to receive divine guidance and maintain soul consciousness while incarnated. When you're properly mineralized with spiritually conscious salt, your cellular structure becomes more receptive to what he called divine downloads, direct transmission of wisdom, healing, and purpose from higher realms of consciousness. This is why Cayce often recommended specific salt protocols for people seeking to develop psychic abilities or deepen their prayer life. The salt literally tunes your physical form to receive and transmit spiritual frequencies more clearly. Modern research on salt's role in neural conductivity supports Cayce's mystical insights. Your nervous system requires precise salt ratios to function optimally, and your brain's ability to process information depends on proper mineral balance. What science is discovering aligns perfectly with what Cayce revealed about salt's spiritual significance decades ago. A meditation teacher from Colorado began teaching Cayce's salt techniques to her students and documented remarkable results. Students reported deeper meditative states, clearer divine guidance, and accelerated spiritual insights. Several experienced what they described as spiritual initiations during salt-enhanced meditation practices that transformed their understanding of their life purpose. This brings us to the practical applications that can transform your spiritual life starting today. Begin each morning by blessing your salt, whether in your food, bath water, or carried as a spiritual tool. Ask that it serve your highest good and spiritual evolution. Throughout the day, remain conscious of salt as a sacred substance connecting you to divine consciousness rather than mere seasoning or chemical compound. Create a weekly salt bath ritual using sea salt or Himalayan salt dissolved in warm water while praying or setting spiritual intentions. Cayce taught that this practice cleanses both physical toxins and spiritual debris, creating space for divine guidance and soul clarity to emerge. When facing important decisions or seeking spiritual insight, try Cayce's salt scrying technique. Dissolve blessed salt in spring water while focusing on your question. Then meditate and observe what impressions, images, or insights arise as the salt dissolves. The documented evidence from thousands of Cayce's readings demonstrates that salt is far more than a mineral. It's a spiritual technology that can accelerate your awakening, enhance your divine connection, and support your soul's mission in this lifetime. But here's what you need to understand about implementing these practices in your modern life. Consistency matters more than perfection. Start with simple daily salt blessing practices and gradually incorporate more advanced techniques as they feel natural and authentic to your spiritual path. Cayce emphasized that spiritual practices must align with your soul's readiness and authentic calling rather than being forced or performed mechanically. Document your experiences in a journal to track patterns, insights, and transformations that occur as you develop your relationship with salt as a spiritual tool. Many of Cayce's most powerful healing cases began with simple practices that evolved into profound spiritual breakthroughs over time. Connect with others who are exploring these teachings. The ARE community continues to research and apply Cayce's insights, providing support and validation for those walking this spiritual path in modern times. Remember that these aren't New Age inventions, but ancient wisdom that Cayce accessed through his unique gift of cosmic consciousness. The techniques have been tested and validated through thousands of documented cases, spanning decades of careful observation and record-keeping. Your willingness to explore salt as a spiritual tool connects you to a lineage of souls who have used these practices for awakening, healing, and serving divine purpose throughout human history. You're not just learning techniques, you're participating in humanity's spiritual evolution and remembering your soul's divine nature. The salt in your tears, your blood, your cells, carries the memory of your soul's journey through countless lifetimes and dimensions of experience. By working consciously with salt, you're accessing this cosmic memory and allowing it to guide your current incarnation toward its highest expression. As you begin implementing these practices, remain open to the profound transformations that may unfold. Cayce's readings consistently emphasize that spiritual growth accelerates when souls align with natural spiritual technologies like salt work, and the documented healing and awakening cases provide inspiring examples of what's possible. Your spiritual journey is unique, but the principles Cayce revealed about salt's sacred nature apply universally to all souls seeking deeper connection to divine consciousness and authentic spiritual expression. If this information has opened new doorways in your understanding, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future revelations from Edgar Cayce's extraordinary legacy. Share this video with others who are ready to explore the deeper mysteries of spiritual awakening and conscious living. The universe has provided simple, accessible tools like salt to support your spiritual evolution. Your willingness to recognize and work with these gifts demonstrates your soul's readiness for the next level of consciousness and divine service that awaits your discovery. Edgar Cayce discovered through his documented readings that the soul chooses its life circumstances before incarnation to fulfill a specific spiritual mission. In his extensive work with over 14,000 recorded sessions, he revealed that most people are living disconnected from their true purpose, but there are unmistakable signs when someone aligns with their soul's calling. According to the ARE archives, Cayce consistently taught that the soul doesn't incarnate randomly. Every life has what he called a spiritual ideal, a primary lesson or service the soul came to accomplish. But here's what shocked even his closest associates about this teaching. Cayce revealed that souls actually volunteer for their life experiences, including difficulties and challenges, because these experiences provide exactly the spiritual growth opportunities needed to fulfill their chosen purpose. This means your current struggles aren't punishments or accidents. They're spiritual curriculum your soul specifically requested. Today I'm revealing the 9 definitive signs from Cayce's documented work that prove you're living your soul's true purpose. These aren't modern interpretations. These are patterns Cayce identified again and again in his psychic readings, verified through decades of documented cases at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. Hit that subscribe button, because these insights could completely transform how you understand your spiritual journey and why you're here at this exact moment in history. The first sign that you're aligned with your soul's purpose is what Cayce called the healing presence phenomenon. Throughout his readings, Cayce consistently observed that individuals living their spiritual calling naturally became conduits for healing energy, even when healing wasn't their primary focus or conscious intention. Cayce taught that when someone aligns with their soul's purpose, they begin to vibrate at what he termed the Christ consciousness frequency. This isn't religious doctrine, but rather a spiritual principle he found universal across all his readings, regardless of the person's religious background or beliefs. But wait, this goes much deeper than you might expect. People operating from this frequency naturally promote healing in others simply through their presence. According to documented teachings from Virginia Beach, Cayce explained that this healing presence isn't limited to physical ailments. People aligned with their purpose become what he called spiritual catalysts, helping others remember their own spiritual nature through unconscious influence. In his medical readings, Cayce repeatedly demonstrated that spiritual alignment directly affects physical health. He taught that disease often results from spiritual misalignment, and when someone finds their true purpose, their body begins functioning more harmoniously. This isn't positive thinking. This is what Cayce called the natural result of spiritual law in operation. Here's what makes this even more remarkable. Cayce's documented work shows that this healing energy doesn't just flow to those immediately around purpose-aligned individuals. It creates what he called spiritual ripples that can affect people across great distances, even people the person has never met. The second sign involves what Cayce termed ideals manifestation. In his philosophical readings, he consistently taught that souls living their purpose experience increasing alignment between their spiritual ideals and their daily reality. Cayce defines spiritual ideals as the highest spiritual principles a soul chooses to embody in each incarnation. These aren't goals or ambitions, but rather spiritual qualities like love, patience, service, or wisdom that the soul commits to developing through life experience. According to his documented work, when someone truly lives their soul's purpose, their actions, thoughts, and circumstances begin reflecting these chosen ideals with increasing clarity and consistency. What once required enormous effort becomes natural expression. Here's what makes this even more profound. Cayce taught that this alignment creates what he called karmic acceleration, where the soul experiences rapid spiritual growth through intensified learning experiences. But this acceleration isn't always comfortable. Cayce's readings consistently showed that purpose-aligned souls often face more intense challenges, not fewer, because their spiritual capacity has increased to handle greater spiritual responsibility. The third sign is enhanced intuitive guidance through what Cayce called attunement with universal forces. Throughout his readings, he consistently taught that purpose-aligned souls develop stronger connection to what he termed the divine within. In his documented teachings, Cayce explained that every soul has access to infinite wisdom through proper attunement with spiritual forces. This isn't special psychic ability reserved for a chosen few. It's the natural spiritual inheritance of every soul, but most people remain unaware of this capacity. Those living their purpose naturally develop this attunement, receiving guidance through dreams, meditation, and intuitive knowing that becomes increasingly accurate and helpful. Cayce taught specific methods for developing this attunement, including daily meditation, dream study, and what he called spiritual application of received guidance. But here's what Cayce discovered that changes everything about spiritual development. The guidance received by purpose-aligned souls consistently directs them toward greater service to others rather than personal advantage. Cayce taught that true spiritual guidance always promotes the spiritual good of all souls, never just individual benefit. In his documented work, Cayce revealed that souls aligned with their purpose receive what he called step-by-step guidance, where each spiritual instruction, when followed, leads naturally to the next level of understanding and service opportunity. The fourth sign involves what Cayce called service magnetism. According to his documented work, souls aligned with their purpose naturally attract opportunities to serve others in ways that utilize their unique spiritual gifts and talents. Cayce consistently taught that service isn't something we do, but something we become. When aligned with soul purpose, individuals find that service opportunities appear spontaneously, often in ways they never planned or expected, and always in alignment with their deepest spiritual capacities. This magnetism operates through what Cayce called spiritual law. Like attracts like in the spiritual realm, so souls committed to service naturally attract circumstances and people that enable greater service expression. But wait, there's something crucial about how this service magnetism operates. Cayce's readings showed that true service opportunities often appear disguised as problems or challenges that need solving. The purpose-aligned soul recognizes these apparent problems as spiritual assignments and approaches them with what Cayce called creative spiritual application. The fifth sign is what Cayce termed patience development through divine timing. In his readings about spiritual growth, he repeatedly emphasized that purpose-aligned souls learn to work in harmony with what he called God's timing rather than forcing personal will. According to archived materials from the ARE, Cayce taught that impatience is one of the primary indicators that someone is operating from ego rather than soul purpose. The ego wants immediate results and recognition. The soul understands that spiritual development follows natural spiritual law and cannot be rushed. Those aligned with their spiritual calling develop what he called active patience, continuing their service work while trusting divine timing for results. This isn't passive waiting, but rather consistent spiritual application while remaining detached from specific outcomes or time frames. Cayce's documented work reveals that this divine timing often involves what appears to be delays or obstacles, but these apparent hindrances are actually spiritual preparation periods that ensure the soul is ready for greater responsibility and service opportunities. Now here's something from Cayce's work that surprised even his most dedicated followers. The sixth sign involves what Cayce called conscious karma balancing. Throughout his life readings, he consistently revealed that souls living their purpose actively work to balance karmic debts from previous incarnations through present life service and spiritual growth. Cayce taught that karma isn't punishment, but rather spiritual education. Every soul accumulates both positive and challenging karma through actions, thoughts, and intentions across multiple lifetimes. Purpose-aligned souls recognize difficult circumstances as opportunities to balance past life actions and accelerate their spiritual evolution. According to his documented work, this karmic balancing often manifests as willingness to serve those who have previously been harmed by the soul's actions in past incarnations. Even when the conscious mind doesn't remember these past relationships, this completely transforms how we understand life's challenges. Instead of seeing difficulties as unfair or random, purpose-aligned souls recognize them as precisely what their soul needs for spiritual advancement. They approach challenges with what Cayce called spiritual curiosity, asking what spiritual lesson or service opportunity each situation provides. Cayce's readings consistently showed that souls who embrace this perspective experience accelerated spiritual growth and increased capacity to serve others facing similar challenges. The seventh sign is what Cayce termed expanded consciousness access. In his philosophical readings, he consistently taught that souls aligned with their purpose gain increasing access to what he called the Akashic records, the spiritual record of all souls' experiences throughout time. According to Cayce's documented teachings, this access doesn't come as dramatic psychic experiences, but rather as gradual expansion of understanding, wisdom, and spiritual perception that guides the soul's service work. Cayce explained that the Akashic records aren't a physical library, but rather a spiritual dimension where all knowledge, experience, and wisdom are stored. Souls aligned with their purpose naturally attune to this dimension because their spiritual vibration matches its frequency. This expanded access manifests as increased understanding of spiritual principles, deeper compassion for others' struggles, and clearer perception of the spiritual dynamics operating in daily life situations. But here's what makes this access even more significant. Cayce taught that expanded consciousness comes with increased spiritual responsibility. Those who gain access to greater spiritual knowledge are expected to apply this knowledge in service to others' spiritual growth, not for personal advantage or recognition. The eighth sign involves what Cayce called spiritual responsibility acceptance. Throughout his readings, he observed that purpose-aligned souls naturally accept greater responsibility for their spiritual growth and their influence on others. Cayce taught that with spiritual awakening comes what he termed spiritual accountability. Those living their soul's purpose recognize that their thoughts, words, and actions carry spiritual weight that affects not only themselves, but everyone they encounter, even in brief interactions. This responsibility extends beyond personal behavior to include what Cayce called spiritual stewardship. Purpose-aligned souls understand that they're temporary caretakers of spiritual gifts, talents, and opportunities that must be used for the benefit of all souls' spiritual development. According to his documented work, this acceptance of spiritual responsibility manifests as increased conscientiousness in all areas of life, from personal relationships to professional activities to community involvement. But wait, there's something even more significant about this principle. Cayce's readings revealed that spiritual responsibility includes what he called vibrational accountability. Every thought and emotion contributes to the spiritual atmosphere around us, affecting others' spiritual states, even when we're unaware of this influence. Purpose-aligned souls gradually become conscious of this constant spiritual influence and learn to maintain what Cayce called constructive spiritual vibrations that promote healing, peace, and spiritual growth in everyone they encounter. The ninth and most profound sign is what Cayce called conscious co-creation with divine will. According to his extensive documented work, souls truly aligned with their purpose learn to distinguish between personal will and divine will, choosing to align their desires and actions with spiritual principles rather than ego-driven goals. Cayce consistently taught that this alignment creates what he called spiritual abundance, where the soul's genuine needs are met through cooperation with universal spiritual laws rather than personal striving or manipulation. This co-creation doesn't mean passive submission, but rather active partnership with spiritual forces. Cayce taught that divine will operates through human consciousness when that consciousness is aligned with spiritual principles like love, service, and wisdom. In his documented readings about spiritual development, Cayce revealed that this co-creation manifests as increasing harmony between the soul's spiritual ideals, its service opportunities, and its life circumstances. Everything begins working together to support the soul's spiritual mission. But here's the most important aspect of this co-creation that Cayce emphasized throughout his work. Divine will isn't separate from human will when human will is properly aligned. Cayce taught that our deepest spiritual desires actually originate from our soul's connection to divine consciousness. When we align with our true spiritual nature, our personal will naturally harmonizes with divine will. This harmony creates what Cayce called effortless service, where spiritual work flows naturally without force or struggle, and where the soul experiences deep fulfillment regardless of external recognition or reward. Here's how you can begin recognizing these signs in your own life, based on Cayce's documented teachings and the practical methods he recommended for spiritual development. First, examine whether your daily activities naturally promote healing and spiritual growth in others, even when that's not your conscious intention. Cayce taught that purpose-aligned souls become unconscious ministers of spiritual healing simply through living from their spiritual ideals. Pay attention to how people respond to your presence. Do they seem calmer, more hopeful, or more spiritually aware after interacting with you? Do they share personal struggles or spiritual questions they don't usually discuss with others? Second, notice if your spiritual ideals are becoming more clearly defined and more consistently expressed through your choices and actions. According to Cayce's work, this clarity increases as soul purpose alignment deepens. Cayce recommended regular self-examination, asking whether your daily choices reflect your highest spiritual principles, or whether you're compromising these principles for temporary convenience or advantage. Third, pay attention to the quality of guidance you receive through prayer, meditation, and intuitive knowing. Cayce taught that purpose-aligned souls develop increasingly reliable spiritual guidance that always promotes spiritual good for all involved. Test the guidance you receive by applying it in small ways first. True spiritual guidance, according to Cayce, always leads to greater love, wisdom, and service capacity, never to spiritual pride or separation from others. Fourth, observe whether service opportunities appear naturally in your life, utilizing your unique talents and interests in ways that benefit others' spiritual growth and development. Cayce taught that souls aligned with their purpose find themselves naturally placed in situations where their specific gifts and experiences can help others overcome similar challenges or develop similar spiritual capacities. Fifth, notice your relationship with time and patience. Are you developing greater trust in divine timing? Are you becoming more willing to continue spiritual service without demanding immediate results or recognition? Cayce consistently taught that spiritual impatience indicates ego involvement, while spiritual patience indicates soul alignment with divine law and timing. Sixth, examine your attitude toward life's difficulties and challenges. Are you beginning to see them as spiritual growth opportunities rather than unfair obstacles? Are you approaching problems with curiosity about their spiritual lessons rather than resentment or victim mentality? According to Cayce's documented teachings, this shift in perspective is one of the clearest indicators that someone is awakening to their soul's purpose and accepting spiritual responsibility for their growth. Seventh, assess whether you're gaining deeper understanding of spiritual principles through life experience rather than just intellectual study. Cayce taught that purpose-aligned souls develop wisdom through spiritual application, not just mental accumulation of spiritual concepts. This wisdom manifests as increased compassion for others' struggles, clearer perception of spiritual dynamics in relationships and situations, and greater effectiveness in helping others with their spiritual challenges. Eighth, evaluate whether you're accepting greater responsibility for your influence on others and your contribution to the spiritual atmosphere around you. Are you becoming more conscious of how your thoughts, words, and emotions affect others' spiritual states? Cayce taught that this growing awareness leads to greater conscientiousness in all areas of life and increased commitment to maintaining constructive spiritual vibrations. Ninth, examine whether you're experiencing increasing harmony between your spiritual ideals, your service opportunities, and your life circumstances. Are things beginning to work together to support your spiritual growth and service capacity, rather than conflicting with each other? According to Cayce's documented teachings, these signs don't appear suddenly, but develop gradually as the soul learns to cooperate with spiritual forces rather than operating from personal will alone. The most important thing to remember from Cayce's work is that soul purpose isn't about career or external achievements. It's about becoming a clear channel for spiritual forces to work through you for the benefit of all souls' spiritual evolution. Cayce consistently taught that every soul has equal spiritual potential and equal opportunity to fulfill its chosen purpose. The difference lies in willingness to surrender personal will to divine will and to serve the spiritual growth of all souls, rather than just personal advancement. If you recognize these signs in your life, Cayce would say you're remembering why your soul chose to incarnate at this time in human history. If you don't yet see these patterns, his teachings provide clear guidance for developing the spiritual attunement necessary to align with your soul's chosen purpose. The path forward, according to Cayce's documented work, involves daily meditation to attune to spiritual guidance, regular prayer to maintain connection with divine will, consistent study of spiritual principles to understand spiritual law, and active service to others' spiritual growth to apply spiritual understanding practically. Through these practices, consistently applied over time, the soul gradually awakens to its true purpose and begins expressing its unique spiritual gifts for the benefit of all. Cayce taught that this awakening is the most important work any soul can accomplish during its earthly incarnation. But here's what Cayce emphasized most strongly about this spiritual awakening process. It requires what he called spiritual persistence. The ego will resist this awakening because it threatens the ego's control over the personality. Doubt, discouragement, and distraction will arise repeatedly. Purpose-aligned souls learn to recognize these as normal parts of the spiritual development process rather than signs they're on the wrong path. Cayce's documented work shows that souls who persist through these challenges develop unshakable spiritual foundation that enables them to maintain their spiritual service regardless of external circumstances or internal resistance. The rewards of this persistence, according to Cayce, extend far beyond the current lifetime. Souls who fulfill their chosen purpose in one incarnation gain increased spiritual capacity and greater service opportunities in future lifetimes, contributing to the spiritual evolution of all consciousness. Subscribe for more insights from Edgar Cayce's documented teachings and share this video with anyone seeking to understand their soul's true calling. The spiritual awakening happening worldwide needs souls who remember their purpose and begin living from their spiritual ideals rather than ego-driven goals.